Tennessee Life is supported through the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you. Coming up on this edition of Tennessee Life, we explore the intricate art of stained glass with Laura Parham, who sees the potential inside every pane.
Didn't have the experience of stained glass growing up in East Tennessee, going to a Southern Baptist church. We did not have stained glass windows. So I went and saw the beautiful cathedrals in Europe, and I fell in love, and I knew that was my calling in life.
Heather Whiteside has an eye for urban life and a passion for the hills of Tennessee.
I drove through Tennessee so many times. Every time I hit the state line, I thought, this is just so beautiful. I think I'm just gonna make roots here. This is where I'm gonna plant myself. And I did.
And we visit the Iron Studio, where Kevin Johnson's team of blacksmiths pride themselves on their eye for architecture.
One of the very cool things about doing metalwork is considered the ultimate graffiti. It will outlast the artist, sometimes outlast the building that it's put on.
Those stories next on Tennessee Life.
I'm Vicki Lawson. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Tennessee Life. Laura Parham has a passion for stained glass and the stories it can tell. Working for over 30 years, she is now passing her business on to her son, ensuring that this craft lives on.
I watch TV, and if I see stained glass in the background that I think is really cool, I will pause the TV, pull out my phone, and take a picture of the stained glass in the background. So I think, oh, that will work someplace. I'll need to make a mental note of that. I draw inspiration from anywhere. I look at historical pieces. I look at art, architecture, any kind of decorative craft, old tiles, old wallpapers, other famous stained glass artists. I look at and see what they have done, how did they do that, what was so unique about their work, and everything I look at and see gets absorbed in and sometimes comes back out as an influence on a particular job. I'm Laura Goff Parham. I own Laura Goff Designs. I design and manufacture custom stained glass windows. I always wanted to be an artist. From about age 12 on, I told my parents, I don't want to go to college, I want to be an artist. And my parents said, no, you need to go to college so you can have a job. My senior year, I spent backpacking in Europe. I spent 6 months backpacking. I'd sleep on the train, wake up in a new city. And so I didn't have the experience of stained glass growing up in East Tennessee, going to a Southern Baptist church. We did not have stained glass windows. So I went and saw the beautiful cathedrals in Europe, and I fell in love, and I knew that was my calling in life. It's funny when people ask me, what do you do? I say I'm a stained glass artist. They think small stuff, they think crafts fair, and I think I don't do small stuff. I do big stuff. I do very complex things. I do church windows, commissions for private residences, anything involving in glass.
She started doing stained glass in the late 80s, and I came along in 1996 and have been by her side relatively every step of the way, which was about 26 years ago. Family vacations, when I was about 12, 14 years old, was at the time, in my opinion, absolutely decimated by my mother's insistence upon visiting every single church steeple that was in sight. Mom would insist on pulling off the road and going up to the church. And this would be Wednesday or at like 10 in the morning. No one's going to be there at that time, but still, she would insist on going there and then rapping on the door, "Can I come in and see your stained glass windows?" We would go in, she would look at the stained glass windows, take a ton of photographs, and it would add on about an hour delay for each successive trip. I was actually in school to study engineering because that's always been more of my passion, is like the technical, let's make something strong, rigid, and creative at the same time. So I guess in a way, I was kind of guiding myself to become a stained glass artist, because there is a lot of engineering that goes into this craft.
Everything is drawn full size by hand. We have to do it old-fashioned way with T-squares and straight edges, and it's hand drawn. Each piece of glass will be numbered and a letter code. And I'm going to stop here because I will show you the pattern underneath. So that gives me a pattern pieces. I have to have pattern pieces to cut the glass. I would never go in and start cutting pieces of glass at random. I need to have these pattern pieces. And these are really cool scissors. They're actually 3-bladed shears. You see, 3 blades. And that center blade takes out a 1/16 inch piece of paper so that when I cut the glass, my glass is small enough to accommodate the lead. Our process will be a customer will come in and ask us to fill a hole, and then we will go through and ask them what do they like, what do they don't like, do you like this style, what style is your house. I will ask what kind of furniture do you have in your house. So I will start off with a quick little doodle. Here's a rough sketch, and if they say yes or no, and I usually will do 2 or 3 rough sketches, and then they'll say I kind of like this, but I like this window too, and point to a photograph, and I'll start merging the designs. We do produce a final design that they approve, and then at that point we start working through what colors of glass do you want? What techniques? Sometimes we get in the middle of a project and the design isn't coming out to my satisfaction, so we will stop and regroup and change techniques or add techniques to their window to get the results that we want. And it's kind of neat with this paint being mixed with pine oil. I can take a clay tool and I can actually draw back into the paint and see it's kind of made lines for me already. And I would go in and fire that. I can go in and draw little loopy-loops, tendrils. And one project I did, I wrote in the paint in the background, I wrote sex sells, and then kept rewriting it as the background piece, and over and over. And so it makes an interesting technique and an interesting look. I can go in and clean up the lines with the clay tool. So it's a fun technique to work with on this.
The sheer amount of time commitment and complexity that goes into stained glass is one of the areas that I think is most often overlooked. In that, for instance, some windows can take us, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, or even up to 9 months to produce a single window. And so the scale of time commitment definitely, I think, is on the overlooked side of things.
I have been in this 30 years and I've loved every minute of it. The future for me, I see another 10, maybe 15 years of work, but my son, Eric, is planning to take over the business, and he is in the shop every day learning the crafts. He's learning all the different techniques. So I see a very bright future.
it's really a drastic difference between, it's kind of, more flat and then pow,
You can spot a Heather Whiteside painting the moment you see it. From downtown to the countryside, this Knoxville artist just can't keep her eye from framing the world around us.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've painted the Tennessee Theater from every angle imaginable. We live in a town that is constantly changing. It's constantly evolving and growing. So every time I go back out into the city, look for inspiration, I don't have to look far because there's a new scene right around the corner. So that's nice. I never run out of material around here. My name is Heather Whiteside, and I am an artist, a painter. I've loved painting since I was a kid, and that's how I spent my spare time, in my room, painting the walls or painting furniture or painting whatever I could get my hands on. And I just knew that I would be an artist when I grew up, and so that was an obvious path. Raised primarily in California, but my father lived in New York City, so I hopped coasts quite a bit. And when I was old enough, I used to drive from New York to Southern California, and I drove through Tennessee so many times. Every time I hit the state line, I thought, this is just so beautiful. I think I'm just going to make roots here. This is where I'm going to plant myself. And I did. And so I think I was only 24 or 25 when I first moved to Nashville. And that's where I had my son, and kind of bounced around a little bit, but ended up coming to Knoxville. And this is, in my opinion, this is my hometown now. When I was a younger artist, and I think all artists go through this, but you sort of have a focus and you work on that for a while, and then you experiment with something else. And when I say a focus, I'm talking about maybe doing paintings of people for a while, and then still lifes and landscapes, and you sort of just, that's how you learn and grow. And ultimately, I started doing house portraits for people, and I would sit out in front of their house and paint their house. I did that for several years, and then word got out. I got some publicity out of it, and before I knew it, I was booked with house portraits. And I really loved painting architecture, and I happened to be in an area where there was really beautiful, beautiful homes and beautiful architecture. And so that crossed over into more corporate work, and I expanded on that because I just enjoyed it so much. So I ended up painting cityscapes. And this was many years ago. This was more than 20 years ago. That's kind of what brought me to doing the cityscapes and the scenes of Knoxville. And then when I'm not working on a cityscape, I like to do landscape painting, sort of a trip to the country for me. I get to work on a country scene for a little while, and then I go back to the cityscapes. The sun. And so I kind of work it out on canvas myself. So I kind of start with, usually I start with like a base color, like a background color, just so it's not stark white, and also to kind of give it a little more depth. But in this case, I didn't do that. I was really just trying to work out some things, and that's why I'll sketch it out here. And this is going to be a Tennessee River scene. And so, and one other thing that's kind of one thing I do, and I know a lot of painters do this, but it depends on your medium. So I work in acrylics and oils primarily. And so you work on the background and you work your way out, and then you work on the general. You don't get detailed in the beginning, but as you build up and build out, you refine the details. So with the art restoration, people will often bring me a painting which has been, it may be blackened by soot, may have nicotine, or just usually they're filthy. Mice droppings, and they're in someone's attic or basement for who knows how long. And I have to determine two things before I can restore a painting to start. And that is, what residue is on the painting, or is it just aged varnish? And secondly, what materials is the painting made out of? A lot of artists didn't varnish their work. A lot of the old oil paintings are not varnished, so there's no protective layer in there. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. And it's just tedious, very, I approach it very carefully. But these are really good examples of what I often will receive, and you can see that there is some pretty significant tears in this canvas. It happens a lot. I'll also be repairing this frame, but to show you, you can see that this canvas has actually had some previous repairs done a long time ago. So typically, I'll have to undo what the other artists do often. So this will have to be removed. You can see that they tried to reline it with just paper, which is not the proper way to handle it. But you'll see the holes on the front of the canvas here. Right there and there. And this will, of course, get cleaned. This has some aged varnish, along with just dirt and debris. From a business perspective, I think it has to do with the consistency and the body of work that you build over time. And it just becomes your niche. And, I still love painting what I paint, so that helps. I think that part of it is that they identify with the scenes, and it's their memories from their hometown. And no matter where I go, I think there are people that have memories of, maybe that's where my husband proposed to me, or this is just special places to them that are near and dear to their hearts. And I paint pictures that people like to hang in their home or their office. And I look at the city view, and I want it to be artful and beautiful. And so I think that really resonates with a lot of people.
Kevin Johnson uses heat and metal to solve problems. So when someone needs a piece to help complete a home, they reach out to the Iron Studio.
I love my job a lot. It is something that's very satisfying. It's especially satisfying to see something that is just kind of out of thin air into my head, onto a piece of paper, out here to the shop, and actually created out of metal and applied to the interior of a home. My name is Kevin Johnson. I'm the owner of this establishment. It's the Iron Studio of Kevin Johnson. I grew up in Burbank, California. My folks moved into a house that didn't have any landscaping around it. Dad was going to put in a pool, but he was too cheap to hire anybody to come in and do the landscaping, so we did it all ourselves. We did some brick work, we did some cement work, and we did some iron work. So he bought a welder, and I was about 14 years old, and he put me to work cutting pieces of steel and welding them together. Fence and the gates that we had made came out pretty good, so there was a lot of friends and relatives that wanted to have iron done as well, and Dad had a job and I didn't, and he told me to get to work. Told everybody that Kevin can do it because he's got nothing better to do. So I just started doing fences and gates for people, and as a 14-year-old I was making some pretty good money, which felt pretty good. That's how it all got started. We'll get it over today. Well, I never really thought of it as a viable business. It was just something that always paid well. I was always making a gate for somebody or a fence, but I never thought I'd do it for a living. Started out in the corporate world. I worked for several different big companies doing engineering work kind of thing. In the high-tech world, you always get moved around the country, or you get laid off and picked up by somebody else, and it was always a vicious cycle. I was never out of work for a long period of time, but it would happen at the drop of a hat. And every time I got laid off, there was always somebody around that needed an iron gate or a fence or something done out of iron, and I was always there to foot the bill. And then I realized, after a few of those layoffs, that my iron work was probably more dependable than doing the corporate life. At that time, I started out in California, and there I was faced the recession that was going on at the time, and every person that had a pickup truck and a welder was an iron guy down there. And I decided that it was time to move, and we came to East Tennessee, and that's where we've been stationed for 30 years. I made one phone call to an interior designer, and she told me to get over here right away. I needed 2 tables built for a car dealership, and needed some custom tables made. And before I knew it, I was deep entrenched in doing iron work for folks here in East Tennessee. My dad taught me a long time ago he always said, Kevin, be a problem solver. No matter what kind of job I had, I was there to solve a problem. So what I'll do is I'll see what a client needs, whether it's a designer. Sometimes a designer has an issue that they need something very special done. I will go and listen to them, see what they've got going on, and then come up with a solution for them, propose it to them, draw it out for them. Then I'll bring it into the shop, and either myself or one of my employees will take it from there. Usually I can assign it to a particular person depending on their skills, and they'll get it done for me. We work with steel. We worked every once in a while with a cast iron product, not too often. We'll work with brass, we'll work with stainless, and every once in a while aluminum, but we really don't like it here, but we can pull it off. Steel is probably the most common material we'll use here. The advantages of steel, it's very workable. It's relatively inexpensive. It's gone up quite a bit in the past few years, but it's very workable, very weldable. It is easy to forge when we want to heat it up in the forge and actually move metal around with when it's red hot. It is, we don't melt anything down to a liquid form here, so we don't do any casting, but we'll do a lot of forge work where we'll take the metal red hot and start manipulating that material. In the forge, we're heating up our metal to 2,300 degrees. And it's getting nice and red hot, but it's not melting. It's still in a very malleable stage. And what I did is I took the material, which was square, and I bent it over the anvil to create this is called a button scroll. I create the button by folding material over on itself and punching it all into kind of a little shape like a button. So with a button scroll, you create your button, but then you create the illusion of a bigger button by squeezing down the material over here. And as you squeeze that material, you taper it, let it taper to the final size, which is 3/8 of an inch, which is the rest of the material. Then I stick it back in the forge, and I start forming the actual scroll, the circle part of this thing. And a scroll like this could be used in any application. You'll see it used in furniture. You'll see it used in architectural metal, like some gates or like a balcony or something like that. So a really good quality scroll that is forged will have a beautiful end, whether it be a button, or it could be a taper, or it could be a fishtail, and then it turns into a nice even scroll. So what we'll get once the project has been assigned to one of my crew, we'll determine how much material we'll need, what kind of material we'll need, and then we'll put an order in. The truck will bring it in usually in 20-foot long lengths, or in 4x8 sheets if it comes in sheet form. And then we'll take that, we'll measure it out, cut it to the right size, lay it out on one of these tables, and then start welding it together. Sometimes this stuff has to be bent, Sometimes it has to be rolled, and we'll take the material, cut it to size, weld it, put it together, start assembling. Once the assembly is done, then we'll either paint it or we'll powder coat it for whatever that application is. One of the very cool things about doing metalwork is considered the ultimate graffiti. It will outlast the artist. It will sometimes outlast the building that it's put on. There is elements of ironwork that are being pulled out of wrecked homes, hundreds of years old, and they'll be reapplied to a new piece of architecture. It's already come to pass in my particular short lifetime here in town where I did a home, put in a bunch of fire screens into this particular home. They lasted as long as the homeowner was there. They sold the house. The new homeowner moved in and says, I would like something different for the fireplaces in this house. So I pulled out all my old fireplaces and put in new ones. So it's kind of happened.
We hope you've enjoyed a look into the creativity that exists right in our backyard. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next Tennessee Life.